if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you can't help but fall into feeling like a victim at times, and this victim mentality of why are my circumstances the way they are? Why can't I catch a break? You want to listen to today's podcast because I interviewed Noah Sharpe, who is a young woman. She's in her mid-20s, but she drops so much life wisdom and a way to beat that victim mindset, the way to beat your circumstances, and the way to come out on top. And she's going to share her journey from growing up in poverty to running a multi-six-figure business that she owns. And again, she's in her mid-20s. She's just getting warmed up. I can tell you, when you hear her talk, you'll realize she's just getting warmed up because failure is not an option for her. So I think you'll be inspired by this podcast. I also think you'll just really enjoy the conversational tone because she just kind of tells it like it is. Enjoy. Noah is a 26-year-old fitness and personal development coach and an entrepreneur based in Southern California. Noah's story is very interesting, and you're going to see a pattern of resiliency as we go through this interview. She grew up in poverty, and she's going to talk about that. And she even dropped out of high school to help her mom and to work to contribute to the family. She is a person who puts in the work. And then we're going to fast forward because now she runs a successful business. She has a big following, and she's actually pursuing her passion, which is helping people and sharing the secrets to success around health and personal development. And she has an entire coaching practice around that. So we're going to go through all that, but she's got a wonderful story, and I know so many of you are going to benefit from this. So without further ado, Noah, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Awesome, man. I'm so excited to be on here with you, brother.
Yeah. My pleasure is mine. I want to go through a lot. I want to unpack a lot of stuff here. And I think I've seen a pattern with the guests that we've had on that have been successful. Most of the guests that I've had on have built all of their success. Nothing was handed to them. And, we know that entrepreneurship it can be a struggle and it's a lot of work. But you also grew up in an environment that may not have even lended itself for someone wanting to take a chance on being an entrepreneur or taking control of their life. Noah, can you take us back to just growing up? What was that like, and what were the circumstances in which you grew up?
Yeah, so, I grew up in a small town in Northern California at a single mom with, supporting me and my brothers. And my dad was, growing up younger, a little bit in and out of the picture, and then out of the picture entirely for the, next 10 years of my childhood from 8 to 18. So my mom was a freaking rock star to, all accounts, for the fact she was working multiple jobs. But the thing about, anyone who's grown up with a parent who's doing that many jobs to support you guys is they're not super present. So
Yeah.
that led to its own type of, child development of just me kind of being all over the place emotionally, me having to, find myself in the world. And luckily I got into sports very young. So that kind of gave me the only type of stability that I had in my entire, childhood was sports, which I'm so grateful for. And obviously, the more I was, getting older and trying to figure myself out, and I was starting to party when I was young, probably, just had too much freedom. But at the same time, I think, like I said, the combination of having a mom who had us in church when I was young and sports, no matter how kind of far I was going left or right, I always had those kind of core beliefs and structure. So, just really trying to figure out who I wanted to be and not really having a lot of role models in my life. By the time I was, 17, I knew that I needed financial structure. I was like, okay, like it's like the hierarchy of needs. You can't really want college and all this other stuff when you're still, stealing food. So
Yeah.
I started my first part-time job when I was 14 and a half, turning 15. And then by 17, I was like, okay, I want to focus on money. I don't really like sports. I loved it. I was, obsessed with it. I was great at it. But I was like, I want to have stability.
Did the coaches, when you were growing up in sports, one, I'm just curious what sports you played. And then also, did you find the coaches to be that surrogate that was more present and you got direction and
100%. Like I'll never forget. Like my coach, his name is Brett, from elementary school all the way through. He was always, even if when he wasn't my coach into high school, was a super big pivotal person in my life. Like he got me my first new pair of basketball shoes. Took me and a couple of other girls to like my first WNBA game and like painted that picture and like was one of the only people who really took me outside of my limiting beliefs at that time on like possibilities and what it's actually like to be around a calm family and environment and really kind of pouring into me in that way. And even though I was like a knucklehead kid, naturally I'm still knucklehead now, but was someone who actually poured into me like, hey, like you're good. Like you can actually do something. And I think when you have even one of those people in your life, especially at a time like that, that's everything. 'Cause sometimes it's all you really need. You just need one person that's like, hey, like just letting you know, like if you don't screw this up, you can actually go somewhere, you can actually do something. Especially if you're in a small town and you don't see a lot of different ways of life. You see probably people who've already made it and are settling down, or people who are doing what you shouldn't be doing and partying and to get caught up in that type of lifestyle and drugs and getting pregnant too young and all that stuff. So even having one person who was that type of male figure and someone who poured into me was huge.
Oh, I love it. That's really cool to hear. That's really cool to hear. So at 17, you say, look, man, I Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, I can look for this stuff near the top of the pyramid, but I need to eat. My family needs to eat. And it sounds like you then went to work full time to really just start to make the ends meet, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%.
So how do we go from there to, and actually before we go there, I would love to understand, because I think I know there's gifts in every circumstance, right? Whatever happens to us, there's a gift in there somewhere. We have to find it. Sometimes it's harder to find, let's be honest. But what would you say are some of the things that you learned that you use today that you got from growing up in a less privileged home, in a home where food wasn't always readily available, and poverty was a real thing? There had to be lessons in there, and how have you applied those lessons is the real question. No, how have you applied those lessons?
I feel like in hindsight, and I know I'm still not super old, but in hindsight, my mindset now, I'm so blessed to have grown up the way I did because I've developed fortitude and grit and the idea of bigger picture thinking at such a young age because you really like what are you gonna do? Give up at like 13? Which some people I'm sure they do, but for me, even like going through like my teens and like the depression and going through that victim mindset of, oh, I don't have this and I don't have, two parents and oh this and especially because I'm really blessed enough that my mom literally had me enrolled in a school in like the nicer part of town where I was taking a bus across town every day. So I was seeing the other side of things, and that and enough was just enough to know that okay, well, my situation is not the norm. Or even if it is the norm, my situation is not the only possibility in life. So there's that, and I think being able to really just start to look for the silver lining and being able to not play a victim. And I think developing those type of lessons when I'm 16, 17, 18 versus I'm now in my, going into like my mid to later 20s. And I'm seeing people that are just now developing those life skills now. They're just now going through the life isn't going their way. They're just now having to develop like not being a victim, all these things and all these life lessons, life's happening. They're to figure out, okay, how do I pick myself up when I have nothing? How do I take minimal things and make something out of that without a lot of help? And these are things I had to figure out when I was 15 years old because it was
Yeah,
me. And
yeah.
a lot of kids are just now getting out of college in their 20s and figuring out, okay, well, without any help, how do I? And so I feel so blessed that I got to develop all those lessons so early because then going into my 20s, I'm like, okay, well, I know what it's like to have nothing. So honestly, if I can build anything, that's a freaking win. If I can, have anyone on my team to help, that's a freaking win. Yeah, life is gonna knock me down, but like I've been down so much worse. And I can like always have that kind of like I love the underdog mentality. I love the idea of being I still have to mentally put myself in that mindset of we could lose it all because there's a different type of drive when you have nothing. There's a different type of drive when you're just working to make, ends meet. And if you don't work and there's a different type of fuel of it versus when you surpass a certain financial income, where it could be really easy to get comfortable. So all these things I learned, I almost like to sometimes put myself back there a little bit more to even get that drive of, coming out of comfortability. So learning like fortitude and mental toughness, and even being an optimist coming out of the situation I was in my childhood is awesome for me. And I'm so grateful that I had so many lessons given to me young, so that now I can kind of hit the ground running in my like mid 20s.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. No, I've had so many guests on here who are successful like you, and I think so many of us, in some form or fashion, and the scale varies, but have some type of trauma or very challenging times in our youth. And I think if you don't have, if you don't have any of that, I don't know how driven you're going to be as a human being. Obviously, if you have too much of that, you got to deal with a lot of other stuff and work through that first. But man, I've made this argument on this podcast so many times. There's like this sweet spot of trauma or challenge. And by challenge, I mean like tough stuff. Because then there's a piece of us that there's this, I'm going to prove to myself, I'm going to prove to whomever, I'm going to prove to the world that I can be successful, and I'm going to overcome these circumstances. And I had a guest on, he said, you're absolutely right. He goes, a therapist once told me this, that it's that chip and that drive, that obsession is rocket fuel. It's just, and when you see how it takes people, is some people, he says, some people, they get a guidance system on it like you have, and very successful. Some people, that rocket fuel doesn't have a guidance system, and that's when you get into, hey, if one drink's good, then 10's not enough, and if it's this thing, because it's that same kind of drive, but you have to channel it somewhere,
I saw
because it has to come out.
there. I think he was either a former CIA, or you wanted someone who was in a thriller agency type of thing like that. And he was doing an interview on someone's podcast. It might have been Tom Bayou, but he was pretty much saying even the way they've been analyzed in like the psychoanalysis, similar to what you're saying, is the traits of the hyper successful are people who have had just enough trauma where they have this, I need to prove it to the world, or they're seeking validation, or they're seeking success from whatever they did in their childhood. They're seeking that type of affirmation, but not too much trauma where it's detrimental, where they puts them into, either a mental health issue or drugs. So it's literally exactly what you're saying is what they said. And he was
Yeah.
like a former agent or something like that. And he said they realized these traits with the hyper successful. So yeah, I could say
Yeah.
that's pretty lucky.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So fast forward now. So then you're working full time, and then you, at some point, you have this background in sports. You get into personal training and building a client list. So how did that start?
So the choice for me to go full time in training was, I was literally it was probably about a 9 to 12 month window where I'd already been kind of trying to get out of my partying phase. I'd already, had the injury, so I wasn't really, playing sports and trying to come off of that, because I had a severe back injury where literally it was hard for me to sit on a toilet and pee. Like it was, and going from being someone who's always been an athlete and then working out and I can eat what I want and drink what I want, and then having a hard time sitting on a toilet was this mental freaking coffin is the best way
Yeah.
to put it. And coming out of that and just trying to, not be in pain and trying to get my strength back and not feel like this freaking 75-year-old woman. It was this process where I started going, I had a regular 24-hour fitness membership like anyone else, and just starting to, go more frequently and just really just get my strength back, and then starting to fall in love with that process again. And just really, it gave me this appreciation for my body that I think I hadn't had before, because when you're a child athlete and you've been doing it forever, this your body just seems like, oh yeah, it's like you're invincible, you can eat whatever you want, you look good, you do whatever you want. And it gave me this appreciation for my body and my health that I hadn't had before, because it just had always been there. I'd always been athletic. I could always, I'd always been strong, always been fast. So working back from that and just really falling in love with the gym and starting to change my lifestyle habits, and, starting to work out with other people and help them and guide them, and really be just like, oh man, like this is kind of a lane. Like this is something that you do. And I'd been working with a boxing coach at that time who was like, yeah, you could like get certified, like, you know, kind of broke it down with him, and he was like, yeah, like I work like 100 hours a week, a bit, you know, make this amount of money, X, Y, and Z, just all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I could do that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he didn't even
Yeah.
paint a pretty picture, so I'm glad he was like, yeah, I have to work this amount, I have to this and that. They take this amount out of my check. I'm busting ass, this and that, but I work for myself. And I was like, cool, I'm in.
I'm in.
So
Yeah.
that was in Northern California. And then literally, so that was, I think it was in the springtime. Like I had signed a 6-month lease intentionally because I was like, I'm gonna give myself 6 months to get ready. Give myself 6 months to get ready. And that 6 months I saved up, told my job, I was a server at the time, told my job, hey, I'm leaving in 6 months. And that 6 month I did not let myself extend. I was like, that's it. I picked up, moved to Southern California. I hadn't even toured an apartment. I literally like found it online, got an apartment, got down here, and then just started like knocking on doors of the local gym. And like I literally looked up like gym's best to work, like literally gym's best to work for, and it was like 24 Fitness. And I was like, cool. There's one that's like a 5-minute walk, and I would just bug them. I literally took my certification test on like a Monday, and I moved on a Friday. So I was like, okay, pass or not, I'm moving. Like I'm gonna get. So I literally
Yeah.
passed like a
Yeah.
Monday. Like when I showed them my stuff, they're like, dude, you've been certified for like 4 days. So I was like, I'm here. Hey, like, and I would just
Yeah.
bug. They put me in the interview, and they're trying to give me like the runaround, but I would just call them like every day. And then finally, I think they got annoyed of me enough where they're like, fine, like, come work. And I pretty much just lived at 24 Hour Fitness, trying to build clientele for like the first 3 months. And I finally got my clientele built up. I was like, cool. I was making like compared to what I thought, I was working for myself, making my own
Sure.
schedule, making this is it's a whole new thing when you're actually like not answering someone. I was like, oh man, this is awesome. And then I finally getting it going, and then it's spring of 2020, and
Dun dun dun. Yeah.
done. The world comes to a halt. I'm like literally taking a shower on like a Friday, and they're like, yeah, don't come back to work. And I was like, and then the next, 8 months, the year started. So that was the start of my career.
Let's pause right there because I just want to unpack, double click on what you said around. You said so many nuggets in that little story of I set this goal. I talked to this personal trainer that was the gym I was going to. I liked what he was doing. I set a goal, gave myself 6 months, didn't even give myself the option to renew a lease because I had to give notice. So I was having to move. I took my test on a Monday, which means I had to pass that test. And I was moving no matter what. That to me is like a burn your boats situation where failure was not an option. And I love that for the listeners just because anything that where success or failure has an equal opportunity for occurring, then it's a 50-50, right? Because people will allow themselves to fail. But when you put yourself in a situation where I better pass this test because I'm moving and I gotta go and there's no backing out, and I just believe that the human brain responds to that, and that whole burn your boats and no backing out and save nothing for the swim back. It allows a person to have focus on the most important thing. And what you just shared is all that.
I think it's 100% what you said. I think, especially where I was coming from, when like you live in a small town, you know what I'm talking about. Where if it's just comfortable enough where you could probably live there forever and die there, and that's where I was coming from. And I think my the push that it gave me to really be like that. I was working like a regular shift. Like I'd work night. No one ever plans on working at a restaurant forever. No one ever plans on like these jobs that we have. They're supposed to be like these like quick. No one plans on doing it forever. And I'm just like sitting there, year 2 into that job and making, a few $100s a day, which is for if you're 20 years old, 21, that's awesome. And I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and I'm just spacing out and I'm watching like one of my coworkers and she's like in her like mid to late 50s. And I was just like, man, I guarantee she never planned to be doing this at 50.
Mm.
Like, I guarantee, like, you know what I mean? Like, I guarantee,
Yeah.
like, I'm sitting there just like, I guarantee she had some type of dreams and plans. And she knew who I was because I went to school with her daughter. And I was just sitting there just, because that's just me. Like, I'm going to analyze
Yeah.
everything all the time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I wonder what that feels like to like be working alongside someone who was in high school with your kid like a month ago. You know what I mean? And I was just like, and it gave me this like weight of anxiety of like, oh man, I could die here. Like this could be it. I could
Yep.
easily in 20 years be in this city at this job, still having a okay apartment. Like it was just a thing where I was like, oh no. Because in those type of towns where you know just enough people where you can still have plans, you can do the same routine on the weekends, you make just enough money, and it's like that level of comfortability, kind of like I talked about early, is like it was scarier to me to be in that point than the idea of trying and failing. And I think almost to do jumps like that, to put yourself in the burn the boat position, you have to be more afraid of staying where you are than going
Hmm.
somewhere else and failing. And at that moment, I was like, oh, I'll be damned if I'm here in 25.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, like even in that moment, growing up with nothing, I had just enough people in my life and just enough hope and just enough optimism to be like, oh, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be here at 50. Like that doesn't
Yep.
sound right to me. So I think this the fear of accomplishing nothing and doing nothing and dying in that town was had finally pushed me out of the fear of just getting out and what's the worst that can happen? I end up back here.
Isn't it crazy how you use fear twice, right? The fear of dying in this town without accomplishing what I want to accomplish. I that was less than the fear, but it's still fear of going for it, moving to Southern California, not knowing a soul. Like everything we want is on the other side of fear. It just you
Everything.
have to decide what is the biggest fear. That's the one you need to go tackle because it's always going to be fear, no matter what we do, a relationship, anything. There's fear.
Yeah, I mean, and everything, and like, I there's that quote that's like, it's a book I just read it. I'm not gonna freaking remember it, of course, right now, but it says like that your other self is on the other side of pain. Like, on the side of pain is your other self. On the other side of that is your
Hmm.
like on the side of pain and trials is your other self. And I think
Yeah.
we so often avoid the pain and the trials and tribulations that we do. We never get to meet the other version of ourselves. Like this version of myself I am now, I would never have met had I remained comfortable and avoided the trials and tribulations I had to go through. And that
Yep.
what a shame that would be.
Yeah. Tell you what, for being someone in their mid-20s, you've got wisdom. You've got wisdom, Noah.
Appreciate
It's
you, brother.
took me a lot more gray hair to realize some of the things that you're saying right now. Here's a great question then for you is what would you go now that you're who you are, doing what you're doing, what would you go back and tell your 17-year-old self, maybe your 16-year-old self?
I think so. I've had this question before, and the first time I'll tell you how I answered it, and then I'll give you
Yeah.
a different answer. First time I answered it, I said, if I could go back knowing everything I know now, I would tell myself to probably drop out a year earlier and then go for it a little bit earlier. I don't know if that's true now in hindsight. I think I was kind of just being a smartass. I think I would probably do what I did the same, but I had the opportunity to make the jump I did earlier and I didn't. And it's because I was so comfortable. And comfortability is death. And I think if I go back to my 17-year-old self, I would just like tell myself, like, dude, you can make the jump. Like you're good enough to make the jump. Because I think never do we really fully fear that unknown. We fear our inability to. We feel like it's a lack of confidence in self. It's like there's like I've heard it kind of like put in the phrase of like, oh, you're not going to make the investment not because you don't think the thing will work, but because you don't think you'll do the work or you don't think that you can do it. And I think if at the core of most things, like you said, is fear, and I think it's like this inability to see ourselves in a different identity. And I think my 17-year-old self, I was just like wanting to feel like I belong, and I just wanted to feel like even like I was always friends with like my entire friend group, which I still love them to death now, like 10 years later, was a year above me. They were graduating, they were leaving. Like what does Noah look like in school with no people? I already grew up like not really super close with the family, so I think it's just this feeling of wanting to belong. And I think if I go back to my 17-year-old self, I'd be like, dude, like you're enough wherever you go. You're gonna be enough. Like, like and I think that will just tie so much to everything I did, because I think it's kind of similar to like most entrepreneurs who start out from trauma, is like they're trying to prove something. And most of us are trying to prove something. We grew up with like a lack of attention, or we grew up in this chaos, and we have this overachiever mindset because our younger selves always felt like we weren't enough, and we're always just continuously trying to prove it. And now we make it a positive, which is freaking awesome. But
Yeah.
I think that if I had that security in my 17-year-old self, I might have either A, stayed to finish school because I wouldn't have been afraid to lose this dynamic that I had. But at the same time, like if I knew what I knew now, if I knew now in 2024 that most high school degrees are equivalent to GEDs and don't mean anything, this and that, like would it make sense to stay longer? Probably not. But that's probably would be like, bro, you're gonna be enough. Like go after it. Just go after it 100%. Like there's opportunity. Go after it. Just to paint a bigger picture, because you don't see a
Yeah.
huge picture when you're in a small town. You don't see a huge picture when you have a single mom who you only see for an hour a day, who makes dinner and goes in her room and goes to bed because
Yeah.
she works 3 jobs and she's depressed and all this other stuff. Like you don't see it.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it'd been. I would just been like, bro, like you're enough. Go after it a little bit sooner. I'll probably
Yeah.
stay there a little
Yeah.
bit, not as long.
Love it. Love it. Hey, everyone. As you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from, and again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. Let's shift then. COVID happens. I actually owned or still do, but in the franchisor for a chain of boxing for fitness studios. So I lived it too. Like our entire livelihood was taken away from us, and we were told we were not an essential service, which I could give a whole 3-hour dialogue on why we are.
Yeah, I could do a whole separate one on what's essential.
Exactly. So walk me through, how you pivoted in more online, pivoted to help serve and help people that are not right there in Long Beach with you.
Yeah, so COVID happened, everything comes to a standstill, and I think like most people, I thought, dude, because if you've been busting your butt and you have a business, when COVID happened and told you you're getting 2 weeks off, you were like, I could probably use it. Like, cool. Like you saw it, there was like trends, people are posting like day drinking margaritas. They're like, it was like, if you remember the beginning didn't sound scary. The beginning was like,
Yep.
for anyone who was like not a super like hypochondriac, the 2 weeks off were like, oh, thank God, like cool. But going into it, after I realized it was not going to end, and health wasn't essential, it was like trying to maintain the few people I had who had financials that were financial income that was essential, and trying to maintain that online. Luckily, I had built a large savings, so I was kind of had my savings. But 9 months into it, I was like, I think it was just so depressing because it almost put me back there mentally of being like broke, which is so like I was like, what the heck? I've done all this work and like I'm now back to like trying to like spare money and all this. I couldn't stand it. So I think mentally I'd already removed going home to Northern California. So I was off the table. I said, if I go there, I'm not coming back. I knew it. If I go home, I'm not coming back.
You know how that story ends. You know how that movie ends. Yeah.
I know how the movie ends. I've already done this. I know if I go there, I'm not coming back. It'd be super comfortable, and I'm not coming back. I'm not doing this move again. That was off the table. And then I'd always told myself, like, once I moved down, I was not going back to a serving job. But 9 months into it, I was like, I got to do something. I just felt useless. I felt like I wasn't providing in my relationship. I felt so just stuck. I was by myself for like 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, just in the house. So I was like, okay. I started like making interviews for jobs that like not jobs like before, like a serving job, but just like, all right, I can do like maybe like a sales something on the side. And like I kept making them and just blowing them off. Like the idea of putting jeans on to go to an interview was just like, or like slack. It was like it felt like putting on like shackles, dude. It was so bad. So I was making like scheduling interviews, and I would like call them. I would go to them. They'd offer it to me. And I'd be like, oh, actually, like no, I'm looking for thing. So I wasn't like being rude to them, but like I blew off like 3 jobs because I was just like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't put myself back in bed. I was like, dude, I'm gonna have to request time off to like go to the doctor. Like this is these things that you don't have to do
Yeah.
anymore. Like that's so silly to me now. Like it's so
Yeah.
silly. And then the day I finally was like, my brother worked at a car dealership at the time, and he's like, hey, like I got you this, like do a desk job, you answer phones, you make appointments, like it's nothing. And then same thing, I left the interview, and she would ask, she's like, oh yeah, just let me know when you want to start. And I got a call from my old manager, who was like, hey, we're supposed to open again in a week. And I was like, say less. Like click, tell her, hey, blew it off again. And then they pushed it back. And they of course they didn't reopen, right? And I was like, okay. And
Yeah.
then right before that, right at the same time, this is like all within a week span, I got an email from this guy, Adam Mai, and he was like, hey, we're opening a training facility. I saw that you have a application on whatever the one is. So you have an application. We'd love to meet with you. We're going to open a training facility X, Y, and Z. And I go home and I was like, cool, scheduled it. And like the day it happened was like a few days later, they wanted to meet. And I was like, well, let me see where it's at. Let me just see where it's at. And I mapped it, and it was literally at like a warehouse across the street from my house. And I was like, okay, I should probably just go. Like, that's silly. Like, I should go.
Sure.
So get dressed, go over there, and it's like this empty warehouse, no equipment there yet. Like, they're like trying to like pull up the floor. You see like dead cockroaches still on the floor. And it was like, but the way he did, there was him, his girlfriend at the time, his brother-in-law, her, and his cousin. It's 4 of them, and they're like, we want to do this, this, and that. We're really big on integrity, really big on, we want to bring on mindset. We want to build people up. We want to impact people. It was just the words they were using, and
Yeah.
it was like something that was dying in me. Was like, oh my god, like yes, it needs
Yeah.
like gratitude and attention and all these words, and I'm like, this is where I want to be. So, and then he's like, yeah, so pretty much to start, it's going to cost this amount of money. And I was like, whoa, what? So I'd never invest. I'd always been getting paid to work. I never
Sure.
like had to put money in. So I literally was like left, and I was talking to my girlfriend, and she was like, dude, like I've not seen your eyes light up like this in like a year. Because I was telling her, I'm like, man, they're big on gratitude and intention, and they want to
Yeah.
change the world. Like, this is it. And she was like, you have to do it. She's like, I don't care if I'm like having to help you. You have to do it. She's like, go on.
Yeah.
So I went all in, and we opened January 1st, 2021. And it's been like a whirlwind, man. I got like one client week 1, just same thing to 20, but it's living there, just freaking just bugging anyone who listened to me. Second client the
Yeah.
next week, just went in, and my biggest thing was like, I'm not letting this girl help me pay rent. Like my pride was like, there's no
Yeah.
way in hell, like I'm not doing it. I'm not like, I'm gonna do this. Another client the week 3 just went in, and now we just celebrated our 3-year January 1st. And I have like now trainers that work for me, and it's been like crazy. We've expanded 2 different times. So it's been insane.
So,
Absolutely insane.
so now you're finding all the things with business, especially now you have trainers working for you. You guys have expanded. Now it's the scaling, which brings all different challenges, right? Now,
It's a whole different
because no
world.
one,
Yeah. Having people work for
yeah,
you, even just going from being self-employed and being like the sole proprietor, and anyone can open an LLC, but now like having people work for you and managing employees is like its own thing, which has been like a super fun adventure for me now.
yeah. Well, I love how you embrace that. Like, because I know the challenges of having people on a team, but the way you just instantly went to, it's like been a super fun challenge. Like that's the way to approach it. I love that. That's the right mindset.
Because I think, like I said, like I'm at this point, I'm just continuously trying to avoid getting too comfortable. But yeah, like it's something super new, and like it lets me hone in on like building leadership, not only like being a good leader, but like trying to build leaders. And I think it's so fun to like have this opportunity to start to like get other people, because one thing when you become more financially stable and financially successful, and now like when you have a team and you like approach it correctly, you're like, now I want my team to win, and like all these new doors that are open, as opposed to when you're just working for yourself by yourself and working in the
Yeah.
business, and now getting to take a step back and work more on the business, actually build up people. It's been incredible.
Yeah. And the impact you're having on those people will reverberate for years. Like your wake, that you're leaving with your leadership, it'll affect in a good way people that you'll never meet, because the people you're affecting will go positively affect others. The butterfly effect. All right, couple questions here. I always ask every guest, and it doesn't have to be recent, but is there a book? Because I'm a big reader, and the listeners know that I'm an avid reader and love to read biographies and business books, self help books. Is there one, Noah, that you've read, in the last year or two, or in your youth, a book? It doesn't have to be a business book, but a book that when you set it down, you said, "Man, I want to recommend this to my friends. Like this book moved me. This changed me. This influenced me."
Two come to mind. I would probably say The Magic of Thinking Big was like so incredible to me. I was like, because I think there's something, and it's the same reason about the other one, which is The Power of One More by Ed Milet. And in both those books, I think it takes such these complex ideas that to a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, like that just makes sense. And it takes these complex ideas and makes it digestible. And I think The Power of One More really, that my favorite part of it is about, talks about shifting our identity, and it talks about the metaphor of like your internal thermostat, which is your identity. That the reason that people constantly come back to their old ways and go back to the old patterns because they haven't done the first part, which is shift your identity. And like they say, it's the metaphor, the thermostat. That if your thermostat's at 70 degrees, it doesn't matter if you open the door, turn like the heat gust in or that, you're always going to go back to 70 degrees. That gust of cold air or that warm air will always put it back at 70 degrees. And that's why people, they can, lose weight, or they can, if they used to be poor and they get money, they'll find a way to blow it. They'll find a way to get the weight back because they haven't first adjusted the way they view themselves. And for me, it was just like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
yeah, like, which is like, if you say it, like, okay, yeah, like, obviously, but it's like, no, for me, it was like, and even the way I work with my clients now, it adjusted the way when I work with people. I'm like, oh, okay, well, the reason we're going to keep going back is we need to adjust your identity. And it lets me, the way I work with people, I don't just say that directly, but it lets me know, like,
yeah,
oh, they haven't changed the way they view themselves. They still view themselves as like a 21-year-old fat or a little fat kid or a 21-year-old,
yep,
fat woman. Or, oh, they keep blowing their money because they still view themselves in poverty. And they've adjusted the idea or the magic of thinking big of where they could actually be if we adjust it for me. And it expanded my view for myself, but also the way I can now approach others is like, you're always really good. Everything's like a symptoms. Everything's a projection, and like really it's going to the core of things instead of just trying to be like, hey, stop eating. Hey, stop da da da. Like it's just like we're so much more
yeah,
complex than that. And yes, food
yep,
is good, and I love food, but usually there's a reason behind everything, and it really expanded my thinking on how to approach people and how to approach myself.
yeah. Great book. I've read that. I was really lucky and saw Ed speak. This is probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. Um, Soul moving, as you can imagine. He's just an
It's
amazing dude. But
incredible.
great book recommendation.
I'm in Arte Syndicate,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's like getting to work with him and Andy Purcell has
Oh,
been like,
that's where I saw him speak. Yeah, yeah,
I Arte.
yeah. It was a live event. It was a live Arte event in Nashville.
Oh yeah, I was there, brother.
Oh my gosh, it's small
So
world. Small
full
world.
circle, man. Yeah, that was incredible. He's like monumental, man. He's a powerhouse of a human being and so
Yeah.
emotionally intelligent, but yet also a powerhouse.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm a huge fan, huge fan. All right, couple last questions for you. This is a little different, and you're really young, so let's fast forward many decades into the future. You've lived this really rich and full life, and you've accomplished all these things because you have this power of thinking big. But we get to the end of your life, and we're at your funeral, and a loved one is reading your eulogy, but he or she can only pick three descriptors, three words, three words that describe you and the life that you lived. What words, Noah, do you hope? What three words do you hope they choose that describes the life that you're working to live?
Um, Impactful. I want to live a life that's loving. I want everyone to feel more loved and seen if I haven't been around me or been around someone that I've affected. If I could do that ripple effect, like you said, and selfless. Or a life of service. Like that's what I
Yeah,
want to live a life in service and impact and love. I think would be the best legacy I could leave behind.
love it. That's great. That's great, Noah. Last fun question, then I want to find out where people can get a hold of you. If you had a magic wand and I hand you this magic wand that you can wave, and tonight it makes one change to the world. Like the world is different. The world in which we live in 2024 is different when we wake up tomorrow because you wave this magic wand and wish for one thing. What is the one thing you would wish for, and how would the world be different tomorrow when we wake up, according to Noah?
I want to say two different things because I
Yeah.
want to say self-aware because I feel like so many problems we have as society right now, especially at least if we're just talking about America, is like a lack of self-awareness, but also like mental toughness because I feel, and I think maybe those go hand in hand. I think people, as we have such a soft culture that is promotes victimhood and promotes just like a lack of accountability. And also, people don't really need to learn themselves right now. And like, there's an attack on identity in the
Yeah.
culture where, and then you can
Yeah.
see it in so many ways. Like, there's an attack on identity. There's in so many ways, more than one. And I
Yeah.
think if you had like a boost in self awareness and mental toughness, and people went back to you have to earn happiness and you have to, earn the right to be proud of yourself and like earn all these things and whatever word, so whatever that would be, like that would be,
Yeah.
it would be a shift in culture. So I think 100%, like if you woke up tomorrow and everyone was like, no, I need to work on the things on me that aren't good, and I need to work on being a better person, and I need to work on, earning the right to be proud and love myself, and I'm going to build myself into a good person, and everyone did that tomorrow, the world would look insane. So it'd do
It,
that. That's what I would
it
do.
would be, that'd be the last war that was ever fought because people would be
The
so
last one
focused
ever
on,
fought, like like the
yeah.
homelessness crisis, like all these things that you think
Yeah.
about, or like a real lack of
Yeah.
self awareness, where people just stopped working on themselves.
When you said it a couple times and it just resonated with me, is this mentality of victimhood. It is something that will destroy our society if we don't get our arms around it, because if no one takes responsibility, right? It's no one's fault for anything. Man, at some point and quickly that model breaks. That model break. We need people stepping up as leaders. Like, I'll own it. I got it. I'll fix it.
And like, even I remember, I think it's in the book Internal Engineering, when it talks about the word responsibility is the ability to respond and the power in that. And I think there's such a twist on the definition of that, where people, everyone, like, no one wants to be responsible for anything. When I'm like, when you have no responsibility, you're giving the power of your entire life to other people. You're giving like what nothing is yours, and how can you grow from that? And I had a conversation with one of my team members about that like last week. I was like, dude, when you avoid responsibility in everything you do, you're missing so many opportunities to grow. You're missing so many opportunities to say, how can I tweak that? How can I do better? You're not looking at anything internal to plug to like, where's the holes in my own boat? And I was like, and you think you're doing yourself a service by keeping this false idea of yourself in your head by avoiding responsibility, when in reality, you're actually robbing yourself of the opportunity to become this epic human being who's always constantly saying, where, like, Michael Jordan practices basketball. And if you can grasp that concept,
Yeah.
Michael Jordan still practices basketball at his prime. And you
Yep.
as a human being think that you don't need to work on yourself. And
No.
they call people like, you and I, or someone who's an athlete like that, oh, they're an egomaniac. Oh, they're shallow. It's not because we are constantly working ourselves. But what is more like egomaniac than thinking you should never have to work on yourself and you're perfect as is? Like, that's what I always think. I tell people, like, dude, Michael Jordan practices basketball. And if you think you don't need to work on yourself, the amount of like that's the lack of humility. I'm humble as hell because I'm like, oh, there's always something that I can get better at.
Sure. Sure.
But I
Yeah.
think 100% the victimhood, it's crippling, man. It's, if you look around everything, it's crippling. We're making an entire generation this entitled,
Yeah.
soft lack of identity. Like this, it's an identity crisis. It's all of the above. Like, and we're rewarding it, and we're giving
Yeah.
people like more attention for it, and it's gonna make, like you said, it's gonna make a society that just it crumbles among itself, and the
Yep.
people who are like you and I just won't even want to contribute anymore.
Great book called Atlas Shrugged that like outlines this whole thing.
Yep.
Just outlines the whole
Because what
thing.
happened when
Um,
they stopped contributing? Atlas shrugged, and like you have the world in your back. So it's like
yeah.
100%, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Again, Noah, you just like wisdom bomb after wisdom bomb, and you're still in your mid 20s. Like I know you are going to live an absolutely amazing, impactful service, a life of service. Just, I can tell by the way you've just shared today. Where can people find you, follow you, maybe get help from you if they're looking to make a life change, looking to lose some weight they've really been having trouble with? How can they follow you and find you?
So the best way to get a hold of me and interact with me is always gonna be on Instagram at Noah Sharpe, NoahShrpe. I'm also on YouTube, Noah Sharpe Fitness, and then if you want to go directly, just look at some programs. And NoahSharpeFitness.com is my website. But I would always say the best way is to connect with me on Instagram. I'm super good at responding in my DMs. I'm super active on there, so follow me on Instagram. And I always post a lot of free content as well, so I always try to help that way as well.
Fantastic. We'll actually put that in the show notes too, so people can just click right on it there for everybody. Well, awesome. Again, thank you so much for volunteering the 45 minutes and coming on and just sharing your story. It's been really inspiring, and I just dig the way you think and the control you have on things, especially from where you came. Your whole story of burning the boats was inspirational.
Dude, man, no, thank you for having me. I've done a good amount of podcasts. This has definitely been one of my favorites, man. You're awesome. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you made my day. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.